Welcome back to another episode of Messed Up People. Today we're going to talk about hypocrites. Now you know who a hypocrite is. Maybe you're thinking of someone right now. A hypocrite is someone who says one thing but does something else. They live at a different standard than what they teach. Hypocrites no one likes. Everyone hates them. In fact, if you think about hypocrisy today, it's very scrutinized because of the way the media is set up. It's easy to find hypocrites because of Facebook and Twitter and news outlets. It's so easy to find them, expose them, and then broadcast them all over the planet. We hate hypocrites. In fact, hypocrisy is one of the reasons why so many people are leaving the church today. People don't like to see a group of people who preach one thing but do something else. People don't like to see a group of people that claim to follow a God of love but don't show love themselves. People don't like to see people who claim that and preach that we have to be sanctified and live differently but don't live at that standard themselves. Hypocrisy turns a lot of people away from Christ. In fact, even Jesus himself talked about hypocrites. The hypocrites during his time were often referred to as the Pharisees. These people who lived at a different standard than they told other people to live themselves. Jesus was against hypocrisy. No one likes hypocrites. Today, though, we're going to talk about a hypocrite that actually God used, and God was very fond of. His name was David. You probably know him from the story of David and Goliath. If you know much about the Bible, you've probably heard that story at least a couple times. David was known as a man after God's own heart, but this same man was covered in sin. We go later on in his life as he was a king and well established. And David was supposed to go out into battle. You see, during the springtime was the time that the kings went out to battle, but instead of going out to battle himself, he sent one of his commanders, Joab, in his place. And while back in his kingdom, he was looking out on one day over his balcony, and he saw a beautiful woman. And he asked his servants, who was she? She was bathing out there, and he was lusting after her. And his servants brought back word to him that this is Bathsheba, wife of Uriah the Hittite. Uriah was a servant of the king. He was a soldier, and he was out there fighting for his king at this time. And David, obsessed with the power that he had, called for her, brought her into his chambers and slept with her, and then sent her back home. Later on, she brought word to him that she was pregnant with his child. And David, instead of taking the honorable way out and admitting to his sin, brought Uriah the Hittite back home. And he tried to butter him up and tried to give him gifts and send him back home, and even got him drunk to try to get him to go sleep with his wife. But Uriah was a man of honor, and he didn't want to enjoy his stay back home while his comrades were away. So he slept those nights out in the courtyard. David, he felt like he had nowhere else to go. And instead of taking the honorable way out, he decided to get rid of the problem. And the problem was Uriah. So he sent for Joab, the king, the commander of his armies, and he said, "You put Uriah out on the front of the line, and then back away, and let the enemy kill him." And that's exactly what Joab did. Joab sent word back that he put Uriah in front of the enemy's mightiest men, and they destroyed him. Well, obviously God was not pleased with what David did. And to make matters worse, David, after he found out that Uriah was dead, took Bathsheba and made her his wife. He killed a man, and he took his wife. Well, God, he sent Nathan, the prophet, with this message. There were two men in a certain town, one rich and the other poor. The rich man had a very large number of sheep and cattle, but the poor man had nothing except one little ewe lamb he had bought. He raised it, and it grew up with him and his children. It shared his food, drank from his cup, and even slept in his arms. It was like a daughter to him. Now a traveler came to the rich man, But the rich man refrained from taking one of his own sheep or cattle to prepare a meal for the traveler who had come to him. Instead, he took the ewe lamb that belonged to the poor man and prepared it for the one who had come to him. David burned with anger against the man and said to Nathan, "As surely as the Lord lives, the man who did this must die. He must pay for that lamb 4 times over because he did such a thing and had no pity." There's one word that describes this man here, David. Hypocrite. He's a hypocrite. He was a man after God's own heart. He preached about faith and trust in God, but now he's being confronted, and this man is telling him this parable about himself, and he doesn't get it. He says, this man deserves to die. David is a hypocrite. But why then is he called a man after God's own heart? It's because of what happens next. See, Nathan confronts him, and he says, "You are the man." He goes on to tell him, "You killed Uriah, you stole his wife, and now the Lord is going to bring destruction, the sword against your house." And what does David do? Instead of making up a big story, instead of trying to make excuses, he simply says, "I have sinned against the Lord." And if you want to see more about his remorse, go to Psalm 51, because that's all about this occasion. Why was David a man after God's own heart? Because he had a genuine heart. He was genuinely a hypocrite at times, but he had a genuine, remorseful heart as well. A man after God's own heart, a woman after God's own heart, is a person that is confronted with their sin and has genuine remorse. Doesn't try to pretty themselves up, doesn't try to make excuses, just makes changes. You see, a hypocrite is someone who walks over people. But there are 2 types of hypocrites. They're the hypocrites who walk over people because they feel bigger than them, like David did, but then they're confronted with their sin and they feel genuine remorse, and they change. While there are other hypocrites who walk over people because they feel bigger than anyone else, but then when they're confronted with their sin, they feel vindicated and don't make any changes and stick with their actions. That's what made David a man after God's own heart. It was because he had a genuine heart. He was genuinely wrong at times, super wrong, but then when he was confronted with his sin, he was genuinely remorseful and changed. And you can too. Maybe you have been a hypocrite from time to time and you've lived one way, but you've expected something else from other people. Change. Be remorseful. Change your life, and God can use you for amazing things. Or maybe you know someone who's a hypocrite. Don't give up on them just yet. The world gives up on hypocrites. That's why we have so many people going away from Jesus, because they're giving up on his servants. You know, I get it. It's a hard time to live in, especially because we can see hypocrites from a mile away because of the way media is today. But maybe God still has a purpose for them. Let's not give up on anyone, because we're all messed up people. But if we have a genuine heart, God can use us for great things.